I've seen the comments before, and you probably have too. The X100VI isn't much better than my iPhone, or my phone takes photos just as good as the X100 series, or another one, my phone has more megapixels and therefore it's just as good or better than the X100VI. And while you know what? No, these cameras are not in the same ballpark, and we're gonna break all that down. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Chris Hagan, a video producer and photographer in Portland, Oregon. And from the photography experience to the camera controls to the image quality, the straight out of camera colors, ease of use, all of that we're talking about in this video. And you know, maybe we should have seen this X100 series slander coming. It was bound to happen. See, the X100V in particular was super hyped up to the point where it became inaccessible. And the same happened with the X100VI as soon as it launched. And I think to counteract that, the social media commentary swung the other direction into trying to tear the camera down. Be that because you can't get your hands on it, or for easy engagement, or because you bought it for the wrong reasons. If you want to learn more about whether or not this camera may be for you, check out my in-depth review and consider subscribing. But right now, let's dive into why this camera is not an iPhone and, in my opinion, why you can't compare the two devices. First and foremost, and most obvious, is the photography experience. Whether you're a seasoned photographer or not, there's just something much more satisfying about pressing a real shutter button instead of a screen, or even that camera control button on the iPhone 16 that I think most people don't really use. It's not that great. But past the shutter button, the entire package you get with an actual camera, including but not limited to the dials and buttons used to change your settings, the joystick for selecting a focus point, control of your aperture on the lens, and an internal ND filter, set it apart from any phone. The X100 series is wildly popular because it's a great combination of looks and functionality. So to say that you get the same experience out of a camera app is criminal, especially an app that lacks camera control. And this is what frustrates me most with the iPhone. Despite introducing the camera control, you still don't have much real control of the camera because you cannot actually adjust all three pieces of the exposure triangle: aperture, ISO, and shutter speed. And that last one really kills me. And in my case, using the iPhone 15 Pro, a great phone for a lot of people that I do actually like, I don't even have those newer camera control features. Anyway, obviously Fujifilm gives you all the control you need because it's a real camera. I don't need to get into all of that. It's all there and really easy to use, whether it's on the exterior body or within the menus. And while the iPhone is easy enough to use, it's not always easy to take the photo that you want to. See, where I think a lot of people try to compare these two cameras and say they're similar is the output. And in a well-lit, easy-to-expose 4 scene, sure, if you're gonna edit a raw image from the iPhone, you can get a photo of similar or even better quality. Sometimes I do prefer the iPhone in certain scenarios because it shoots wider. But where I've run into issues is with backlit scenes. I've found that my image gets really washed out, and it's pretty hard to recover some of the details and contrast in the highlights and shadows. And where things are even worse is trying to capture photos of a moving subject in anything less than bright light, like direct sunlight or outdoors bright. And I'm not even talking like fast-moving sports or cars, just straight up people in a regular setting. Now, this may sound a little niche and not apply to everyone, but hear me out. Recently, we were at a cafe here in Portland. It's an overcast day at like 9 a.m. So there's not the beaming bright sun, but also there is more than enough light coming in from the windows. And honestly, I liked it because it was a little more even and I didn't have to clip the highlights in the background. Anyway, my X100VI is around 1/160th to 1/250th of a second shutter speed and anywhere from 1600 to 2500 ISO. But when taking photos with my iPhone, the phone set the ISO no higher than 200 and the shutter speed no faster than 1/90th of a second. And most were even slower, around 1/60th of a second. That's well below what a lot of people would say is the minimum to freeze motion. And sure enough, when you look at these shots side by side, you can see the blur from my daughter's toy moving. Now, it may be hard to tell since it's out of focus in the Fujifilm shots, but the motion is at least frozen. Now look at these photos of my sister. A little soft on the iPhone because I just can't do anything about that shutter speed. But from the X100VI, yes, it's a little noisier with the raised ISO, and that takes away a little bit from sharpness, but the motion is frozen. And more importantly, at least I have that choice for how I want to capture the image with the X100 instead of the iPhone forcing me into how it thinks I should expose the image. And of course, when the scene gets any darker, things get even worse. Say I want a raw image to edit of my daughter indoors. Again, when I take the photo, the iPhone determines my ISO and shutter speed. I can raise my overall exposure, but still, I can't control how I'm increasing the exposure. And in the case of the iPhone, it will lower the shutter speed instead of increasing the ISO. That means this slower shutter speed than I want to use gives me an image that's just not quite as sharp. Now, why does the iPhone do this? I assume because it's prioritizing keeping the image noise as low as possible. To show you what that noise probably looks like, I have a photo from my Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, which does give me control of the entire exposure triangle. When I lock in my shutter speed to where I feel comfortable freezing motion, the camera's ISO increases and it produces a considerable amount of noise that you'll need to clean up in post, if you even can clean all of that up in post. But you know what does not produce noise like that? At ISOs of 500 or 1000 or 1250, 1600, even up to 6400, the Fujifilm X100VI. And increasing my ISO to those ranges also allows me to effectively freeze motion. So once again, this cannot be seriously compared to an iPhone Pro, or many of the most popular smartphones. Okay, so now is the perfect time to clarify that I don't dislike the iPhone at all. I think it's great, and the camera within it was specifically the reason I upgraded from my iPhone 12 Pro to the 15 Pro when it came out. It produces a great high-resolution raw image that's nice to work with. I would even say I'm still inspired to shoot with my iPhone despite owning dedicated cameras, because I see the images that really good smartphone photographers and photo editors make with it. But it's not fair to dumb it down to a real camera in comparison to it, nor is it fair to anyone looking to upgrade from a smartphone who may think that the X100 series or Ricoh GR series or any fixed lens APS-C camera isn't worth it. They absolutely are worth it. And I think they're the perfect next step into photography for someone that wants a camera but doesn't want to or isn't ready to start making bigger decisions like which lenses to go with. So that is where my frustration comes from. It has nothing to do with the iPhone itself, but more to do with the attempt to place the phone on the same level as a real camera. Because as with any camera, it has its particular place. Now, besides what I talked about before with camera control, the biggest difference when it comes to picture quality is the image that comes straight out of the camera, which, to abbreviate, I label SOOC, if you've been wondering what that stands for. Even with the photography styles that the iPhone 16 introduced that allow changes to the color and contrast, even if you take the time to dial it in, you still don't have the type of control that you get from Fujifilm's system. And simply put, using the iPhone's native phone app, you do not get photos that look like this, or this, or this. You would need to take the raw file from your iPhone into Lightroom or another photo editing app and do quite a bit of work in post to go from a standard photo to one with significant adjustments to the highlights and shadows, white balance, grain, clarity, sharpness, and stylized colors, all things that you can adjust in Fujifilm's menus and all things that are processed straight into your photo, making it ready to share right away, straight out of the camera. And that's just facts. Regardless of whether or not you have the ability to craft a similar image in post, it's not the same as taking it straight from the camera. And this goes hand in hand with why I say Fujifilm's fixed lens cameras, or a few others from Ricoh and other brands, make for a great next step from a smartphone. They're still really easy to use, but more customizable. And as a bonus with the X100VI in particular, video is extremely usable with its in-body image stabilization. And if you're into shooting log video that you can color grade and post, the X100VI does it just as well as the latest iPhone models, but with much more control than the phone's native camera app and in much smaller file sizes. If you're interested in learning more about the X100VI compared to a full-frame camera, be sure to check out the channel where I've got an in-depth review, and if you already own a Fujifilm camera and you're looking for some good photo recipes, check that out on the channel as well, and probably subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.